A diplomatic rift threatens a special relationship. The UK's ambassador to Washington resigns after leaked memos reveal undiplomatically harsh criticism of the US president. I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is Kim Darroch. Donald Trump says he'll no longer deal with Kim. And he's not talking about a North Korean dictator responsible for mass murder. He means Kim Darroch, who was the British ambassador to the US until he resigned this week. One of the UK's most senior diplomats, Darroch quit after it emerged that he'd called the US president inept, insecure, and incompetent. Prime Minister Theresa May says she regrets his departure, but she herself only has 2 weeks left in her job. And Boris Johnson, the man expected to take over, wasn't as supportive, refusing to back the ambassador. So, what does Darroch's shock resignation mean for UK diplomacy? Melinda Nusifora reports.
The last time these staunch allies were so divided was back in 1856. That's according to the head of the British Foreign Service, who calls this diplomatic dispute unprecedented in modern politics.
Nothing like this has ever happened before. There must be consequences. What they are in detail, I can't tell you.
Last weekend, private diplomatic cables from the UK ambassador to Washington were leaked to a British newspaper. Kim Darroch described the Trump administration as incompetent, inept and insecure. The US president, who's known for not taking personal criticism well, bit back on Twitter. The wacky ambassador that the UK foisted upon the United States is not someone we are thrilled with, a very stupid guy. I don't know the ambassador, but have been told he is a pompous fool.
I think the comments made about him are beyond unfair and wrong. I think he's given honourable and good service, and he should be thanked for it.
Kim Darroch is one of the UK's most experienced diplomats, but he resigned on Wednesday, saying he could no longer carry out his duties.
Sir Kim has given a lifetime of service to the United Kingdom, and we owe him an enormous debt of gratitude.
The relationship between the US and UK is of vital strategic, political and economic importance to both countries. So, could this diplomatic spat derail an enduring friendship? Britain's divorce from the European Union is looming, which means it will soon need to strike up its own independent trade deal with the US. A strained relationship with Donald Trump won't help those negotiations.
I think this case raises a number of very difficult issues. The first is that somebody has, for whatever malicious reasons, sought to either damage the UK-US relationship or indeed Sir Kim personally.
It also calls into question the independent role of diplomats.
Good government depends on public servants being able to give full and frank advice. I want all our public servants to have the confidence to be able to do that.
It's important that our ambassadors are able to write frankly to politicians. If they have to do so worrying about how it might look in a newspaper, it will represent a fundamental change in how our diplomatic system operates.
It's not uncommon for envoys to criticise foreign leaders and their governments. What is uncommon is for the repercussions to play out so publicly. Melinda Nusifora, The Newsmakers.
Let's go to our panel now. We have Britain's former ambassador to Brazil, Peter Collicott. Bilal Mahmood is the vice chair of Labour in the city. And Ben Harris-Quinney is chairman of the conservative think tank, the Bow Group. Gentlemen, good to have you on the program. Ambassador Collicott, should Kim Darroch have resigned?
I think in the circumstances he had little choice. I think it was very highly regrettable that he was put in that position. But given that, he did the honourable and the right thing for the country and not necessarily for himself, and resigned.
But why? I mean, Boris Johnson has said far worse things about Donald Trump in the past. Should he resign as well?
No. he's not in the same position as Boris Johnson is, clearly. But he was in a position where I think he felt that he couldn't do a professional job because of the attitude that the president was taking, and that he was not able physically to do the job that he wanted to do.
Right.
And I think that probably the last straw was hearing that Boris Johnson, potential future prime minister, was not actually backing him.
Right, right. He felt like he didn't have his back. Ben Harris-Quinney, as we look at this, can we say that this came solely from him and solely from within the UK? Or maybe that Trump was just so thin-skinned that his anger put pressure on the UK government, and therefore they kind of twisted his arm and said, please do the honourable thing and go?
Well, the first thing to say is that I think he was absolutely right to resign. His position had become untenable. But I don't think it is solely his fault. I think it is emblematic of an establishment view which have big problems with Trump and Brexit. And in writing those memos, he would not have thought that he was doing anything untoward, because the views of the establishment, the views of Theresa May, that Trump is an inappropriate figure. But many people hold very different views, aren't represented in the British establishment, like myself, that Trump is actually doing a fantastic job as president.
Right.
So I think you have to understand that the way the British establishment works is that you have the same people in post for 30, 40 years at a run. You know, a lot of these people that will be given the role of US ambassador have a 30 or 40-year career in the diplomatic service behind them. And so when big changes occur to the political flow, like Brexit and Trump, the British establishment is particularly slow to react.
Right. Ben, both you and Ambassador Collicott said that his position had become untenable. But is that necessarily the case? Because if the government had to back him clearly and openly and unequivocally, then it's not untenable because he's got the backing of his host country.
Well, I think there are two questions as to determine whether his position had been untenable. And I think it is appropriate in some circumstances for an ambassador to criticise the government that he is liaising with, both publicly and privately. But I don't think that is the case. I think the first question is whether his comments merited. And I'd say that the establishment view would be that they are. But there's a very different view that Trump is doing a very good job, and that wasn't reflected at all in his message, which clearly presented a very biased view of the US administration.
Right.
I think the second point is, what is the nature of our relationship with the United States, and what do we wish it to be? And this is a nation that we call our close ally, and that we want to do a world record trade deal with. So under those circumstances, when you're looking to foster good relations with the president of the United States in this case, then I think a diplomat that is being intensely critical of the president isn't going to serve a good purpose in facilitating those good relations.
Okay, I'm going to circle back. Yeah, we're going to circle back to that and where it leaves Britain standing in a few moments. But Bilal, Mahmoud, both the two other guests are saying, yes, he did the right thing to resign given the circumstances. Do you agree with that?
I think that he had no other option to do so. And not because of what he said, is because of the support and the lack thereof of the future Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He is one of the few people, well, he's the only person I can think of right now that has lost his job for doing what he should have been doing, which is providing a frank and honest view to our government of the American administration and how best for us to deal with it. His priority was what is in the best interest of the United Kingdom, not to placate the Trump administration. Ambassadors, and I'm sure the ambassador will probably knows much more about this than I do, for centuries, their obligation is to provide an insight into another country and to provide the best face publicly to the country in which they're in. He did all those things. The only difference is that he was found out confidentiality was breached.
Right, of course. And there was a leak. And there's a bigger question here as to who might have been responsible for the leak and who had this agenda to leak it to the press. Ambassador Collicott, so Diplomats are known to be very skillful at being diplomatic and very nicely lying sometimes. I'm not calling you a liar, but sometimes you have to do that and you have to put up a diplomatic face. However, isn't it crucial to also then be able to have brutally honest assessments when you're talking within the team, right? This is supposed to be completely confidential. So was the problem that the ambassador maybe could have worded it a bit better? And therefore, if it was leaked, Trump wouldn't have been so upset and the UK government wouldn't have felt that they needed to feel that this might damage the special relationship. Was there a problem with what he actually said in that confidential cable?
No, I don't think the problem is at all what he said. I don't think that is the issue. And certainly one would not want diplomats or others in the public service to have to temper what they say, assuming that those words are going to be leaked. Because as you say, one of the prime jobs of a diplomat is actually to tell it as he or she sees it, so that the government for whom he or she is representing can actually take policy decisions based on a real appreciation rather than on some gilded appreciation, just in case these things might leak out into the press. I don't think what he said is an issue at all. I think the issue is that it was leaked, and the issue is that the President of the United States decided to react in the way that he did with what I consider very unnecessary criticism both of Kim and of the Prime Minister.
Right,
Theresa May.
Yes, when Trump said, I barely know the guy, he's wacky, he's very stupid, he's a pompous fool. Yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting stuff. Ambassador, before I go back to Ben, Ambassador, is this all about Trump? Given that a few years ago, with the WikiLeaks embassy cables, the US embassy cables, we saw all sorts of colorful criticisms emanating from those cables, not only about enemies, but close allies as well. You know, the Americans, about the French, about the Russians, and so on, talking, you know, about Sarkozy, talking about all of these leaders, the Saudis. We didn't really see anybody react. Okay, not many of them were on Twitter back then, but not many of them had the weight of personality of a Donald Trump. So was this all about Trump's reaction, which then cascaded to where we are now?
Well, I think that's a fair enough argument. I mean, one knows that Trump is notoriously thin-skinned and does react to things, whether it's from diplomats or others or domestically. And as you say, I think it's a good point that they ought to remember that American ambassadors also give frank views privately to their government, as was displayed with the WikiLeaks, as you mentioned, the other year.
Ben Harris-Quinney, all this talk of a special relationship, but it doesn't seem like a very special relationship at this moment in time because the power dynamics seem to be wholly weighted towards the United States, that the UK's ambassador can resign over something like this, right?
No, I don't think that's true. And I would take issue with what was just said, although I completely agree that the role of an ambassador should not be to give a biased view in either direction. It should be to present as accurate a picture of what is going on as possible. And what the ambassador, so I certainly don't think that all missives about government should be, you know, Donald Trump's absolutely fantastic and wonderful and the best thing that's ever happened. But equally, it shouldn't be biased in the other direction. I think that was absolutely the problem with this missive, because there's a whole other story to tell. You know, there's many British people, like Nigel Farage, for example, who's a leading politician, that would tell a very different story about Donald Trump. For example, that growth rates in the United States are double than that in the United Kingdom, that he is acting on his campaign promises and that he's on course to win the next presidential election. So there's a much more positive story to tell. And I think what was inappropriate about it is that it only really told a negative story. It made one allusion to don't underestimate.
Okay, but you mentioned someone like Nigel Farage, right? Okay, yeah, certainly. But you mentioned someone like Nigel Farage, right? Farage and other Brexiteers have said all sorts of things about Brussels, right? They've said extreme things about Brussels, and they've said, oh, we need to take back British sovereignty, we need to assert ourselves, and so on. But at the same time, the slightest bit of criticism about the US president and everybody loses their minds and nobody wants to talk about British sovereignty anymore.
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think the point is, I mean, first of all, Nigel Farage obviously isn't a diplomat, and his job is not to give an unbiased, accurate picture of what's going on. His job is to advocate for a particular position and view and ideology, which he does very well. So I think the point is that when it comes to the US ambassador, and this is a problem throughout the civil service and throughout the British establishment, and you've seen this with the dealing with Brexit, that is the establishment view is not the only view. And if that's the view that a British ambassador is solely pushing, the sort of view that you can read in the New York Times and CNN anyway, so there's not a lot of utility in it. If that's the only view that the British ambassador is pushing, then they're not doing their job well, because they really need to be reflecting all sides of the argument in their missives. And I think that is why we have had this very clumsy approach to Trump, that has really, he's opened his hand to us, and we've ceaselessly kicked it away. And I think Boris, as was said earlier, has said some very negative things about Trump as well. So I think that will be a problem going forward. And so I think that Kim Darroch did the honourable thing and the right thing in stepping down. But I think going forward, the government needs to look again at the makeup of the civil service and its diplomatic network and ensure that all political views are represented.
Bilal, is Ben right that it's not so much about the special relationship right now, but it's about the special circumstances that Britain finds itself in, given the nature of the establishment, as he said, and the minority view of Brexiteers and so on, and this delicate position where the country doesn't quite know where it's going, and therefore, when those sorts of words...
It's minority.
Well, you said
it's not a minority
I think
view.
it is. I think it is a strong. I think it is a particularly. I think it is a minority opinion. That's a fair statement to make.
Hold on.
Ben, what I would say
Ben, hold on. Okay, before I go to Bilal, because you said Nigel Farage's view was a minority view.
No, I didn't say it was a minority view. I said that Nigel Farage's job is to give a particular ideological perspective. But if an ambassador was reporting on what is going on in the UK, it would be inappropriate to just give the Nigel Farage view or just give the Jeremy Corbyn view. You've got to reflect all views as a diplomat in order to give an accurate picture. And I think that's not what's going on. But it's completely absolute nonsense to say the Brexiteer view is a minority view, because the majority voted for Brexit.
Okay. Bilal, has the diplomat not done his job properly, and therefore Ben's right?
So a couple of things. First, on the special relationship. Look, I have a special relationship with my wife. If I'm doing something wrong, she's going to call me out on it, and she's going to call me some names, and she's going to be able to tell truth to power, and I'm going to do the same thing. That's the nature and the dynamic of the special relationship. It's not simply kowtowing and placating whenever we can. When it comes to the wider point of we need to look at institutions and we need to look at the circumstances, what Trump and populism in general, and I think it is fair to say that those two have gone hand in hand, has seeped into the political discussion in the past few years is how we attack institutions so easily. They have been around for a very long time, guided by the rule of law, tested through theory, challenged in certain ways. To say that in one missive or one leak, an ambassador said something that was not received well by a president, and therefore we should react accordingly, doesn't give the whole picture. And also, he's got that job because he is taking he's taking the view that he thinks is in the best interest of the United Kingdom. And if his experience is that he is dealing with a White House that is inept and insecure and chaotic, and this is not the only person who said it, the only way to deal with Donald Trump is to work with his advisors, the last person he's talked to, then it's in the best interest of the United Kingdom to leverage what they can from him. He is doing the best job, which is ensuring that we understand how to deal with this president. So in those points, I do think it's wrong to suddenly say it's the messenger who's wrong. It's the circumstances that need to be looked at. If this relationship, which is meant to be so special, is robust, we should be able to have full, frank, honest conversation. I entirely agree that there's probably loads of memos out there with different ambassadors saying some pretty mean things about Theresa May or David Cameron before her, or even Tony Blair. If they were to come out, I think the unlikely situation would be for any of those prime ministers to frankly throw their toys out the pram, to force the President of the United States to do something in retaliation.
Ambassador Peter Collicott, to end this discussion, has the weight and the gravitas of the Foreign Service and Britain's diplomatic outreach been damaged by this whole affair?
Well, I fear it has. But I think I fear that it has by a lot more than just this incident. I think over the last few years, the political disarray in the United Kingdom, mainly stimulated by the Brexit debate, has meant that people abroad are raising their eyebrows, nodding their head, wondering what actually is going on in the UK. And therefore our international influence is actually being diminished. We are going to have to work very hard in the future to re-establish that, not just with the Americans, but with a whole load of countries who don't quite understand what is going on in the United Kingdom.
Okay, I'm looking forward to Kim Darroch's first proper in-depth interview after all of this. It could be quite revealing. For the moment, let me thank you all, Ben Harris-Quinney, Bilal Mahmood, and Ambassador Peter Collicott. Good to have you on the Newsmakers. It's 3 years since Turkey faced one of its biggest security challenges in recent memory, when members of the military tried to overthrow the government. The people resisted, and those who tried to seize power in a coup were defeated. But the prime suspect, who Turkey holds responsible, is still at large. Fethullah Gulen. TRT World has produced a documentary airing this Sunday, which examines new evidence against him and uncovers how his organization infiltrated a nation. Here's a sneak peek.
Breaking news, of course, an attempted coup in Turkey. This is a highly fluid situation across all of Turkey.
An attempted military coup in Turkey.
On the 15th of July 2016, an event changed Turkey forever. Thousands of members of the military and security forces tried to stage a coup. More than 250 people were killed and more than 2,000 injured. Airstrikes pounded parliament, targeting political and military figures. Both bridges across the Bosphorus were seized. So was the national broadcaster, and a team was sent to find the Turkish president at his hotel in the resort of Marmaris. And when the coup failed, Recep Tayyip Erdogan knew who was responsible. That man is Fethullah Gulen. He's been living in the United States since 1999, and the Turkish authorities say he runs a criminal organization. We've uncovered new evidence against the main suspects. We've investigated how they've been linked to Fethullah Gulen, how the Turkish authorities believe that he has been calling the shots, and we'll show you first-hand accounts of how his organization operates.
I'm joined now by Andrew Hopkins, TRT World's diplomatic correspondent and the presenter of the documentary Until We Take Control. And Jeren Kenari is with us as well. She was a consultant on the film. Good to have you both here in studio. It's hard to believe it's been 3 years. Before we look at the film and what it uncovers, Jeren, take us back briefly to that night 3 years ago. What was it like for you?
Well, I was doing my job on the night of the coup. I was a journalist with a Turkish TV station back then. I was at the TV station, and then we were informed that there was something extraordinary going on. At first, it was very difficult to believe, but we were told that there is a coup going on. So it was quite dangerous for journalists that night because the putschists raided TRT and some other TV stations. So we were also stranded in the TV station. So it was quite traumatic for everyone in Turkey because I mean, there had been incidents like terror incidents in Turkey, but nothing was like this. I mean, the Turkish parliament was bombed by our own F-16 jets, and it was a huge trauma for the whole nation.
Yeah, and there was something that you had done in the months afterwards where you collected a lot of the information and evidence showing the links to the FETÖ movement, which was fascinating and very helpful, something I sent to a lot of people as well, as people tried to piece together what happened, why it happened, and who exactly was behind it. And as we try to answer that over the years, Andrew, you're quite similar to me as an outsider coming into this and learning more and more about the movement and the politics at play and the dynamics. What was it like for you to make this documentary, Andrew?
Well, I think it's very interesting because with this particular documentary, a lot of what has happened since the failed coup attempt happened has been used really for political purposes by one side or another. But once you get past that sort of information, that sort of propaganda flow, there's a lot of very strong circumstantial evidence against some of the main suspects who are involved in the coup attempt on that particular night. And in this documentary, we've brought together a lot of the information, a lot of the footage that is out there in the public domain in Turkey, but is not necessarily so freely available out there in the English language media around the world. So we have CCTV footage of people who have known links to Fethullah Gulen, who are well known to have those links in Turkey, who were seen inside the airbase from where the whole coup attempt was managed. They're walking around, they are university professors, they are business executives. They're just walking around talking to military officers as though they're friends. They're tapping them on the shoulder. There's no sort of hierarchy involved here. These people are unsupervised. And we also look at how these people, they were arrested the morning after trying to escape from the airbase where this coup was taking place. And they all gave the same alibi. They all said they were looking for land to buy. On the very same night when a coup was happening, everybody knew it was a coup that was going on. People were scared. They were taking money out of ATMs. They were stockpiling food. But yet these guys were out there in a field looking for land to buy. It was a very strange situation that was going on.
Yeah. Jared, one of the things that angers the Turkish state so much is that they want to see Fethullah Gulen here on Turkish soil standing trial for the coup attempt. The United States has so far not budged. There's the extradition attempt from Turkey. Now, when we look at this movement, a lot of people around the world, whether in Africa, whether in the United States, whether in Central Asia, when they are told that this movement was behind a failed coup attempt in Turkey, they say, well, I mean, they built schools, they built hospitals. You can't tell me those guys are behind it. Help me understand that dynamic to the organization and why it's so alien for people who see how the movement operates outside of Turkey's borders to believe that there's a nefarious network within this country trying to overthrow a government.
Well, it's normal that this whole organization is quite difficult to understand for non-Turkish people. I mean, it was very difficult for Turkish people to understand it as well. So we're talking about an extremely complex, an extremely well-structured, as well as insidious criminal network. So in the documentary, we actually show how this organization, this movement has grown. It is kind of an intra-hostile intelligence. It has a lot of people infiltrated Turkish state, but also a lot of network charity activities. But this is one and same organization. It has double faces, triple faces. It has have so many faces. It presents itself as a movement that promotes interfaith dialogue, education, but mainly this is the front of the organization. Through this propaganda, through these messages, the organization garners human resources as well as money to gain leverage over, for example, U.S. senators, for example, British parliamentarians. So here we're talking about a very complex organization that has tentacles all around the globe. And I know it's quite difficult for anyone to understand how this organization infiltrated Turkey, because it's a cult, it's an interesting cult, it's a sinister cult, it's very secretive, but it is dangerous. And this danger mainly stems from the hypocrisy of this organization. It presents itself as this peace movement, but on the background, there's a very, very ugly story.
Right. Andrew, something that we both witnessed was a briefing from some very high up people showing us how the movement works in Konya. That was the briefing that we got. What was interesting for me is that there was some extraordinary evidence put on display in Ankara when we were in that room. Was that, in a way, a kind of microcosm where you just had one city showing the depth and breadth of the infiltration in terms of police and judges and businessmen and so on? What I saw and what we saw as you continued your journey making this documentary, was that a microcosm of how they've tended to operate across the country?
Yes, I think it was. I think from what we heard in that particular briefing, that this organisation, it's very difficult for people to understand unless you get the full background of how this organisation has been operating for several decades in Turkey, how it was able to sort of manipulate the political situation over the past few decades, from when Turkey was, in name at least, a very secular country, where the military were basically in control, where the government was a very secular organisation, where the state had very secular individuals. And it's very interesting to see how that was built up over the years and how that organisation came to be in control, if you like, in Konya, of so many different aspects of business, of education, of the police, of the judiciary in this particular city. In the documentary, we show various charts which look like a sort of family tree, if you like, which show you how this organisation operates. Even at the very top, you have a man who is in charge of the whole of Turkey for this organisation. He's known as an imam. He's not necessarily a religious leader for the organisation, but it denotes some kind of seniority within the organisation. But you'll have him at the top, you'll have one in charge of each of the 7 provinces, you'll have one in charge of each 81 cities in Turkey, and then that divides up into the areas of business, the judiciary, the military, all these different areas of society where you have the same structure. And this is how the organisation is able to build up its power and influence.
Right. Massive attempt to get rid of FETÖ from within Turkey, from being in the state institutions over the past 3 years. So tens of thousands of people fired, thousands of people arrested, people standing trial and being convicted in the military and elsewhere. Yet we still saw very recently 122 people in Izmir and Konya being arrested for being members of the organization. That's 3 years on. What does that suggest to us, Ceren, that this is far from over?
I mean, according to Turkish government officials, the institution has infiltrated to the core of each and every Turkish state institution. And this is such a complex network, like nobody, we often joke in Turkey, like nobody is a Gülenist, even Fethullah Gülen is a Gülenist. Because they never, the members of this organization were never transparent about their allegiance with this cult movement, with FETÖ. So this complicates things for both the Turkish state and for many innocent people as well. So in that sense, this investigation is still going on in Turkey. I personally believe that the FETÖ network in Turkey has damaged severely. And we have to keep in mind that there is a cross-ideological attitude towards the organization among Turkish people. Even the government supporters, of course, they're quite hostile to the movement. They don't, due to what happened, but also, though Turkey is a very polarized country, the opposition sympathizers also hate the movement. So there's a cross-ideology consensus that this organization should be eliminated from the Turkish state. So I think that the organization has been exposed to a lot of damage in Turkey. However, it is still intact abroad.
Right.
It still has a network abroad. It still owns charter schools. It still has some lobbying power in the United States, in UK. There's still people, business people who are funding this organization. They're living abroad, and the Turkish state is quite bitter about all these extradition cases, with especially the Western countries.
Right. Okay, Jaren and Andrew, good to chat to you both.
Thank you.
At the last Indian election, the main opposition party suffered one of their worst defeats in history. So it came as no huge surprise when the Congress party's leader, Rahul Gandhi, quit last week. But in his resignation letter, he said he'd lost the fight against Hindu extremism. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his ruling BJP has been accused of pandering to Hindu hardliners. Gandhi singled out the RSS, a nationalist volunteer organization that he says has infiltrated the country's institutions. Is he right, or just finding an excuse for his defeat at the ballot box? Here's Abu Bakr Shamahi.
He was the latest in a long line of political leaders from the Nehru-Gandhi family. But after a humiliating defeat in India's parliamentary elections, opposition leader Rahul Gandhi recently announced his resignation. Leading members of his Indian National Congress party had encouraged him to stay on. But for Gandhi, the task of defeating Prime Minister Narendra Modi was just too hard. In his resignation letter, he said that the Congress party didn't just fight the ruling BJP, but also the entire machinery of the Indian state. Gandhi then went on to say that the RSS had completed the capture of India's institutional structure and that the country's democracy has been fundamentally weakened. RSS stands for Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, in English, the National Volunteer Organization. It's a Hindu nationalist group with 5 million members across India. And some of them hold a lot of power, like Prime Minister Modi himself, most of his cabinets, and India's president as well. The ruling party, the BJP, is also closely linked to the RSS. The organization is openly opposed to Indian secularism, but it says that's because it believes in celebrating a Hindu culture that's been disenfranchised after centuries of foreign colonialism and domination. Some even compare the group to the Boy Scouts. And when Modi first came to power in 2014, the RSS tried to emphasize that they had no problems with non-Hindu minorities like Muslims.
The forthcoming government should think about 1.25 billion Indians, and Hindu-Muslim differences are not acceptable by our constitution, and also not by our culture.
But many, like Rahul Gandhi, think that's a smokescreen. The RSS's own mission statement describes India's only Muslim-majority state, Kashmir, as having an oppressive Muslim-majority character. It also says that past Indian governments have endlessly appeased Muslims. Events linked to the RSS, like the destruction of the Barbary Mosque in 1992, have left Muslims fearful of their increasing dominance. The RSS was one of the main forces calling for a Hindu temple to be built on the site of the mosque. Separately, the RSS's goal of reordering Indian society according to a Hindu identity has led to it funding hundreds of schools across the country. In places like Assam, it's led to more support. The state has seen the arrival of refugees from Bangladesh, some of them Muslim. The RSS has whipped up opposition to their arrival.
Migrant people, they have no relation with our language, they have no relation with our religion, with our culture. They started madrasas in their area, and they teach us Arabic languages.
The growing strength of the RSS in Assam, outside of its traditional heartland, is changing Indian politics. In the last election, the BJP got their best ever result here, and just like in the rest of the country, it's slowly increasing its power, with the help of the RSS. Abu Bakr al-Shamahi, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now in Mumbai is Sanjay Jha. He's the spokesman for the main opposition party, the Indian National Congress. And in Leipzig, Germany, is Raghav Avasthi. He's a lawyer and member of the Hindu nationalist group, the RSS. Gentlemen, good to have you on the program. Sanjay Jha, is this just sour grapes from Rahul Gandhi blaming the RSS for his failures?
Well, I think what Mr. Gandhi has very categorically stated is that India is experiencing a very disruptive society on account of the right-wing fundamentalism escalating ever since Mr. Modi became Prime Minister. Please don't forget that in his second time when he's been sworn in, you have already had violence, attacks on the minorities. There was a Tabriz Ansari who's been lynched to death. And you have found that overall, the government turns a blind eye to the most, shall we say, vulgar atrocities being committed on the vulnerable sections of society. Ultimately, we are, a secular liberal democracy. But you have members of the ruling party who have talked about amending the Indian constitution and dropping the term secular and socialism.
Okay.
So there is an attempt to try and change the entire character of our country.
Okay.
And I don't believe that he's got a mandate to do that. He's got a mandate to govern the country, not to change its entire basic structure.
Raghav, Rahul Gandhi is describing a trend. He's describing something underlying the politics right now, which is an extremist Hindu ideology, as he put it. Your response?
No, I don't think there is anything extremist or about the Hindu ideology that the BJP represents. As a matter of fact, the Congress party has Muslim blood on its hands, and I will say it categorically on your show tonight because I think people across the world need to know that there were so many riots that used to take place when the Congress was in power at the center and many other states in India. Over the past 5 years, there has been not one major riot that has taken place, and Mr. Jha has the gall to sit here and lecture the BJP. There were riots in Bhiwandi, there were riots in Ahmedabad, and there were riots against the Sikhs in 1984. So the Congress party has a pathetic record when it comes to protecting the interests of minorities. And therefore, it's, in psychology, this is known as projection. It is trying to project its own inadequacies and failures upon the BJP and the RSS. The fact is that the people of India have rejected Rahul Gandhi in unequivocal terms more clearly than they did in 2014,
so
mind
how
you, because
about,
the BJP's
Raghav,
vote share as well as seat share has gone up.
Fair enough. So how about, might both be true? Yes, under Congress, they messed up in many ways. There were terrible riots under Congress's leadership, and they should be held responsible for what happened on their watch. And in addition to that, we have the RSS, which is driving a certain Hindu nationalism that isn't very tolerant towards India's minorities. And right now, there's a majoritarianism taking place in Indian politics.
Not at all. Not at all. And I will tell you why. I'll tell you why it is so. As far as the RSS is concerned, it's not as if Hindutva or the RSS is like a Semitic religion and we have one holy book. If you want to understand what the RSS feels about India's minorities, you should go and listen to what Mohan Bhagwatji said. Mohan Bhagwatji is the head of the RSS, said in June of 2018, wherein he categorically asserted that Muslims are part and parcel of India's body politic, and there can be no debate on that. And add to that the empirically verifiable fact that riots against minorities in India have gone down over the past 5 years. But yes, for the international media, it's a sexy story to report that evil Hindu nationalists in India are killing Muslims, when the truth is the opposite. Of course, there is a country of 1 billion people, and there will be incidents here and there, but the intensity as well as the horrific nature of the incidents is not the same as it was when the Congress was in power.
So
and as a matter of fact, I'll categorically assert.
Right, let's get Sanjay's response. Sanjay?
Well, I'm absolutely astonished that the gentleman representing the RSS talks about incidents being here and there. There are 45 Indians, citizens of this great country, who have been slaughtered to death on account of lynching violence. And according to this gentleman, these are just incidents that happen here and there. What is the fact? He's waxed eloquent on the number of riots that happened when the Congress was in government. What he's not telling you and the viewers of your program is who perpetrated those riots, who is responsible for the riots. You may have a government. Can the government be microscopically managing each and every individual in any society? They can't. So the people responsible for it, and please Google it, are people from the RSS, from the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, from the what is their unit called the Bajrang Dal, and of course the BJP. Now let me also tell you that Mr. Awasthi, please do not interrupt me. Let's
You
have
can
a
come in a
civilized
second.
Come in, please.
You
No,
can come
I'm
in a
sorry.
second. Sanjay is going to finish his point. Finish your point, Sanjay.
Yeah,
finish your point, Sanjay.
Yeah. So my point is, the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, can say what he likes, but the truth is the RSS based out of Nagpur controls his government, and RSS did not even actually believe in the Indian flag. They want to change the Indian constitution. They talk of a Hindu Rashtra. And let me tell Mr. Awasthi, the founders of the RSS found Adolf Hitler as a very inspirational model to follow.
No,
and do
they
I need
did
to tell
not.
anybody what Adolf Hitler stood for?
Raghav?
Yeah, can I come in now?
Sure.
So Mr. Jha should be asked as to whether congressmen, people who were Congress party MPs, and as a matter of fact, one chief minister who has been appointed by the Congress party, that is Mr. Kamal Nath, were involved in the anti-Sikh violence of 1984 or not. There are eyewitnesses who place Mr. Kamal Nath, and I'm saying this before the international media, at the scene of a riot right in front of a Gurdwara where Sikhs were slaughtered. So please, Mr. Sanjay Jha should stop, this holier than thou game. And as far as, I'll come to Adolf Hitler now. As far as Adolf Hitler was concerned, there were the full extent of the horrors of the Nazi regime were not known, and once they were known, the RSS denounced Adolf Hitler's regime. And around in the 1930s, there were many Western media outlets like Time magazine who were also in thrall of Hitler. And after the successful completion of the 1936 Berlin Olympics, he was held as some sort of an exemplar. So I also know history. I'm sitting in Germany right now. So Mr. Jha should not tell me what Hitler does or does not stand for. He has to realize that. And as far as the Congress party is concerned, they should introspect as to how their policies have led to the ruination of so many, ruination of millions of Indians. The BJP is supposedly the right-wing party. It is the party that is providing toilets to the poorest of the poor people of this country. It is giving them rural housing, which the Congress party did not do. Because they want to be in the thrall of one family. They want to build this personality cult around a family. And they want the people of India to worship them. The people of India are saying to the Congress party, thus far and no more.
Let's bring Sanjay in.
A chance.
Sanjay, come in.
Yeah. Since he mentioned, the riots of 1984, what is the truth? The truth is in the 2002 riots that happened in Gujarat, when the current Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, the Supreme Court of our country, the highest judiciary, called in Narendra Modi as Nero, saying that he looked away.
No, there is nothing. No, there is nothing in any judgment. Don't lie, Mr. Jha.
1 minute.
Don't lie, Mr. Jha. People cannot, please. If you lie, then I will intervene. If you are going to lie, then I will intervene. Sure, I'm a lawyer myself. Tell me where this judgment has been reported.
It's on record.
Tell me where the judgment. Give me the citation of the judgment. Give me the citation.
1 minute.
Please don't make these unfounded, unsubstantiated assertions. Give me the citation.
Okay, Raghav, give him a chance.
I'm answering you.
Give me the citation.
Very simple. I'm telling all the viewers of your esteemed program, just put this on Google. Supreme Court calls Narendra Modi Nero, and you will get the entire stuff. It's all.
Why don't you give me the citation?
For decades. Well, let me tell you,
Mr.
the
Jha,
truth is
give me the citation.
Okay, hold on.
Supreme Court judgments are reported.
Sanjay and Raghav, listen. Okay, so people will Google that.
The right wing is famous.
Okay, people will Google that.
Famous
No doubt.
for post-truth, alternate news, and fake news.
Okay, so
that's
now,
a fact.
so listen, we will have our viewers, whether watching this on TV or watching this on digital platforms, they'll be punching things into search engines. They'll find a lot of information. And we can play this game of, pogroms and riots and who was responsible for it. But I want to ask a final question here, Raghav. When Rahul Gandhi uses a specific term, when he linked a journalist's death to what he called BJP RSS ideology. BJP RSS ideology. When he says that, What does that mean to you?
No, what it means to me is that the state law and order in India is a state subject, as in most federal democracies. The Karnataka government was run by the Congress and its allies till about recently. So why is it that nobody from the RSS has been charge sheeted or convicted? They should be charge sheeted or convicted if they are responsible. It's all very well to make these statements after you've lost the election. When he had the chance to, if he says that the RSS was responsible, why were these people not charged or convicted? I don't understand this, double speak of Rahul Gandhi. The fact is that he's a failed dynast and he's being consigned to the dustbin of history along with his dynasty right now as we speak, and to that extent we are witness to history being made in India.
Sanjay Jha, BJP RSS ideology, is that accurate? Is that something you stand by?
Well, let me tell you, isn't it a fact that in Mumbai, the Maharashtra where I live, a very aggressive Hindutva organization has been, people have been arrested for actually manufacturing bombs and planning terror attacks. And let's take one classic example. The BJP has a member of parliament called Sadhvi Pragya Singh Thakur, who was accused of terror and is still undergoing trial, and who said that Mahatma Gandhi's killer, Nathuram Godse, was a patriot. Now, this is the current manifestation of India under the current BJP. They do not respect secularism.
Can I come in here?
They mock it, and they have no respect for
here?
other religions. And it's now beginning to, I would say, become so brazen and blatant that I think the world is watching. And I'm glad you're raising these pertinent issues.
Okay, so I'm out of time, but I'm going to give you, Raghav, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond, right? But at the very end, I just want you, for clarity, just for clarity, Nathuram Godse is not a patriot, in your opinion, is he?
No, Nathuram Godse is not a patriot according to me, neither for the RSS. As far as Sadhvi Pragya Thakur is concerned, she was jailed during the regime of the Congress party. They could not find any evidence against her for more than 8 years, and that is why she was released on bail. Had it been a Muslim languishing in Guantanamo Bay without a trial, and had he been incarcerated by the United States, the entire international media would have called blue murder. Just because Sadhvi Pragya Thakur is a Hindu, you have differential standards. And these differential standards are the reason why the Hindus of this country, not just the Hindus, but the Muslims, have also voted the Congress party out. And Rahul Gandhi has lost from his own parliamentary district, which his family has represented for decades. So I think the Congress party needs to introspect, and they need to hang their heads in shame, for they have brought about the ruination of my great country.
Sanjay Jha and Raghav Avasti, good to have you both on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.